Sometimes complexity is necessary. Do you just do more basics, or do I just quit the sport? However, complexity is not something that arises immediately on a first principles analysis of how to do strength conditioning. Sport training is transference training. There is absolutely a place in some nuanced context for transfer of training type of stuff. But for most weight room training, the basics kill in the best way possible because all we want is the basics.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Okay, so you mentioned meat and potatoes training, right? So what is that?
In the context of sport training or strength sport training?
Well, no, let's go strength training now.
Strength training.
So
yes. Excellent. Okay. So there is a big question or a movement to try to complicate strength and conditioning training.
You think?
That's crazy.
Why you're sitting here right now.
As a matter of fact, I am going to overcomplicate it. Wouldn't it be fucked if I was like, and it's not complicated enough? Oh, shit. So, and to steel man that position, it is by no means clear that things should be simple. If you are reclining while Elon is launching another one of his rockets and you're like, tell you what, man, that ain't that complicated. Just put more fuel in it, bud. People are like, dude, shut the fuck up. You have no idea how complex this is. And the human body is like way more complex than a rocket. So respect to people that are trying to make it complicated because I retract that potential claim and replace it with some number of them have all the best intentions in mind. Mm-hmm. And sometimes situations require quite a bit of complexity because the basics work real well until they fucking don't. And then you're left with like, do you just do more basics or do I just quit the sport? Sometimes complexity is necessary. However, complexity is not something that arises immediately on a first principles analysis of how to do strength conditioning. And there are many ways in which people think it arises that are probably wrong, and we can attend to a few of those. Mm-hmm. So back to the needs analysis. The way our bodies move in a complicated way, all the small muscular adaptations and tendons and ligaments and nervous system and how to coordinate firing your glute and all that, they are handled exceptionally well in sport training, drills, combinations, and for sure practice. So then what isn't being attended to most times in sport to some extent, which is why we do strength and conditioning, and let's just talk about the quote unquote strength part, getting jacked and getting strong and getting explosive. Those are kind of the three components in most sports of the weight room stuff. What's not presented enough is sufficiently high forces for sufficient durations to really make good muscular and neurological adaptations. And sport is insanely complex in almost every case, such that if you tried to describe what movements in the gym and specific techniques a wrestler or a football player or a tennis player should do, I would ask you how the fuck that maps onto the kind of latent vector space, to use AI terms, of like how many movements are possible on a mat for wrestling. Mm-hmm. Like it's trillions. Which muscles are involved? Like all of them. Are there fundamental core movement patterns that are done? Sort of. But so anytime we try to say, well, we're going to do this exercise like this because it's good for wrestling, we have to step back and be like which move in wrestling? And there's like 100 moves and every guy does them differently and everyone has different limiting factors for all their muscles. The whole system is so complicated that in most cases, the best we can do in the component of gym training for sport is to make the muscles and movements that form the basic core of the human body's ability to move stronger, bigger, stronger, and then more powerful. And that's about it as far as handling 90-something% of all the variation you'll ever see. And so when you're training folks for a specific sport in the weight room, it turns out that what you're really doing in the weight room is getting their body bigger, stronger, and more powerful. The body. And with some exceptions on the margins, most athlete training in the weight room will look remarkably similar because the weight room has a remarkably very simple thing you're trying to do. Just get the guys or the girls fucking strong. Get them fucking jacked. Get them strong. And then teach them to move against high forces with incredible explosiveness. As soon as you can do that, you build their general ability to do that. And you give them back to the sport coach. And the sport coach has them go through the same moves they've been going through before, and all of the minor transitional adjustments from being able to do a close grip explosive bench press, or from doing a clean, or from doing an underhand pull-up, to doing the specific moves of wrestling or football or gymnastics or whatever, are handled by actually doing that sport. Now that they have these bigger, stronger muscles, they're going to train them through the same techniques and tactics that they usually do, and then they're going to learn to use those bigger, stronger, more powerful muscles in that sport itself.
So the transference is happening with this sport coach.
Sport training is transference training. Yes. And there is absolutely a place in some nuanced context for transfer of training type of stuff, for sure. But for most weight room training, the basics kill in the best way possible, because all we want is the basics. Imagine someone who's upgrading your race car engine, asking the question of like, so like, do you do a lot of turns or do you brake a lot? Shut the fuck up and make my engine produce more horsepower, god damn it. That's the real thing. And so what you end up doing in strength and conditioning a lot is, for whatever amount of time and amount of fatigue window that we can fill in with strength and conditioning, because like, it's not infinite. Sport coaches like, look, you got 4 hours a week with my guys, and if you make them so sore that they can't practice their moves properly at all, yeah, you can do that for 6 weeks here at preseason. As soon as we hit like real prep time, I need you to cool it. That's real. Those are the constraints you're operating under. And you need to pick movements that can train multiple muscles at the same time, often muscles that coordinate together in fundamental human movement patterns. Jumping like patterns, pushing like patterns, pulling like patterns. Posterior chain patterns and anterior chain patterns. Anterior chain, as an example, you hang on a pull-up bar and you take your toes and you pull them all the way up to touch up behind you. Anterior chain. Posterior chain is you reach down on a huge deficit to pick up a deadlift bar from really low and you stand all the way up with it. Pushing, obviously pushing exercises, pulling exercises of all kinds, jumping replicator exercises like squatting, various lunging movements. After a few more examples of those basic movements, we run out of shit to do because we've really checked off all of the major quadrants of how the body moves in a simple way. And remember, we don't care about the complex ways, because once you make the body strong in the simple ways, it's fundamentally strong all around. And then you take that fundamental strength and now you go, okay, now go do gymnastics or whatever the hell you guys do. And that's where their bodies make the fine-tuned adjustments to take that basic ability and transfer it into the specific ability of their sport. And that does not take a day and it does not take a week. It takes months and it takes years for athletes to integrate all of their new muscle and strength they're building into their sport performance abilities. So the good news about being a strength and conditioning coach is that you can use fundamentally very simple lifting paradigms, taking the athletes and compound machine, dumbbell, body weight, and barbell movements through full ranges of motion, with a couple of check boxes for sport that we can talk about, like the way athletes should be training is a little different than everyone else. And if you just do that, it's not like, oh, well, you could do better, but good enough. It's like, that's almost as good as it gets. And anything more complicated is presupposing something. And that presupposition is the limiting factor for their ability to do XYZ sport move is the way they like touch down their knee in the lunge position. So we're going to spend more time down there. That might be the case, but you're missing out on getting them overall jacked and strong by spending more time doing that. And because you notice that in a specific sport move, that's the limiting factor, that doesn't mean that that's even going to resolve it, because that could be a technical issue. Like if you watch me skate, you'll see me fall instantly. And if I fucking get on the skates, you'll see me wobble a ton. You'd be like, he needs more leg strength. Have you seen my lifting videos? I'm categorically, else is a cocky thing. I could be wrong. I'm the strongest hockey player in the NHL right now. It's not a drug test I have to pass, but So that ain't it. But like you just thought I needed more exercise. You ever see like the movement coaches will be like we need more rotational strength because the guys are collapsing and they're collapsing because they're 6 minutes into a fucking wrestling match. They can't breathe anymore. That's why they're fucking collapsing. And there's no amount of getting their obliques stronger that'll fix that. But there is an amount of getting them all around stronger that could very much just make them better. And so strength conditioning ends up being simpler than many people make it out to be. Simpler doesn't mean like that's it, you just stop thinking about it. So the next thing is you can select the movements intelligently. Some athletes do need more pushing ability. It varies by sport and by position. Some need more pulling ability, some more posterior chain, some anterior chain, some jumping ability, and so on and so forth. So you definitely can attend to that. Some athletes need more of something even that you wouldn't predict from their position because they're weak in it and it's costing them in their sport. And there's all kinds of intricacies you can go into. One especially that's pertinent is athletes have to exhibit their sport at live speeds, which means trying very hard. And so in lifting, especially when in hypertrophy, this probably should still be a thing, but especially in strength work, in sport training, we want what's called a maximum intent to move. Like if you're a power lifter, no one's timing your lift. If your squat takes 3 seconds versus 1, nobody gives a shit. White lights either way. In sport training, if you take 3 seconds to do something that should have taken you 1 second, someone beat you to the punch and they scored the goal first or they blocked you and that's it, it's done. So for athletes, another universal concept other than train more or less the whole body and robust basic compound movements is to have a maximum intent to move in most training. So that means you can take a barbell and lower it under control, but I want you accelerating that motherfucker off the chest like you're throwing it every single time so that you at the very least don't take the neural qualities and degrade them to teach them to move slowly. In sport, they're taught to move fast and explosively in almost every sport. In the weight room, you should reinforce that. Not only does that not fuck them up for sport, but it makes them even better at moving faster and explosively. You get me a guy on the other line in football, and I've seen him do an incline bench where he does 500, like, he just throws it off his chest. But I don't want that guy fucking coming up on me. Holy fucking shit, he's going to blow my head off my body, which is exactly what you want. So we want fundamental movements through full ranges of motion to develop robust muscularity, some degree of injury prevention. If you have they only squat down to, if the guys only squat down, a third of the way, but in sport, they're going to be exposed in those positions. That's no good. So relatively full ranges of motion with maximum intent to move through fundamental compound movements, sometimes biased in some way or another to their sport needs. And much of your work for hypertrophy will be sets of 5 to 10. You can do higher rep sets, but in most sports, strength and power is the thing that actually does what you want. And the transfer of training between hypertrophy phases and strength phases is easier if you don't come from sets of 15 to 20 down to sets of 3 to 6. That's a big transition. It could take weeks for you to get used to it. And there's a bit of an injury risk there too. You're not used to handling those loads. Even though your muscles are big enough, your tendons aren't strong enough. Sets of 5 to 10 for hypertrophy work, sets of 3 to 6 for basic strength work, sets of 2 to 3 for power work.
Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by Element. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. Get yours at drinkelement.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link.
And what I just said, the last 10 minutes, is, I would say, something like 90% of all strength and conditioning applied in practice.
Now, with the explosive concentric, I assume they have to have the technique to be able to do that first, because if they have shitty technique, do you want them throwing a bar?
Absolutely. You want, as a strength and conditioning coach, great point. I guess I assumed as a truism, but 100%.
Well, think of college athletes.
Yes. Good technique in the lifts. So you want good technique for everything that you're doing. And really good athletes intuitively understand that. And ones that have been strength and condition trained before, like some of the best athletes I've worked with personally, if you tell them, hey, do this lift, the next question is, oh, how do I do it properly? They really pay attention, and then they try to do it like you. And as you have them in your practice, in strength and conditioning, you're coaching them, over time, you make their technique better and better and better. But also, as their technique gets better, your intent to move coaching with them also goes up. So as their technique gets better, at first, you don't worry about too much explosiveness. You teach them the movement patterns, lots of warming up, a few work sets. Then over time, as their technique gets really good, you go and now we're going to ask you to move faster and faster and more aggressively and more aggressively. For a lot of sport training, for a lot of athletes that are doing strength and conditioning training, the eventual goal is to have them approach their strength and conditioning training like they approach competitive sport training, with violence, with intent, and with technical mastery. Because even though they don't spend all their time in the weight room, it's important. There's a quote I don't love. This is not 100% true, but what is it? Everything that you ever do, you should try to do well.
Yeah.
Everything productive you ever do, you should probably try to do well. Right? Like if my wife and I go to like take dance classes for fun, like I'm not trying to do that shit well. I'll be high as fuck, barely doing that shit. And then my excuse for not learning the steps is I'm Jewish and I'm fucking uncoordinated, but I frankly don't give a shit. But entertainment aside, in the real world, like, yeah, you want to do the shit well. And a big mentality, and I'm sure no doubt many strength and conditioning coaches are going to be nodding along to this one. A lot of athletes, they really try on the field of play and the field of practice. You get them into the weight room and they think that the weight room is just a place where they just have to like green check the box. If I just show up and coach doesn't yell at me too much and I go through the motions, I'm getting whatever it is I'm getting in here. And a lot of times they don't even know what they're getting in here. When I was a strength and conditioning coach, I would make my athletes aware, not like not in an annoying, consistent way, but enough that they knew why we're in here. Like I used to coach volleyball players and I was like, you guys notice something about how the ball sounds, the hit sounds from girls that are better or from guys that play the sport? And they're like, yeah, it's like more of a boom. And then like the ball just goes really fast and it's really hard to hit back. I gotcha. The reason we're doing incline bench press and pull-ups is so you can boom fucking bitches in their face and shut them down with the ball. They're like, fuck yeah, let's fucking do it. We're here to do important things. We're here to make you a fucking nasty machine. And that means it's serious, and that means it's go time, and that means we're fucking trying. We're trying good technique, and we're trying really hard to move that bar fast. And if it's heavily loaded, you move as fast as you can against that massive resistance. And I don't want a lot of your time. And when you leave, I don't want you to think about strength and conditioning. When you show up for 3 hours total per week to myself as a strength and conditioning coach, I want your A grade effort. And that's a big part of strength and conditioning coaching. Of course, is knowing the techniques. Of course, it's being able to teach them. Of course, it's being able to program well. But another big part of it is being able to level with the athletes as humans and really connect with them and get them to try. Because sometimes you have like sort of more elite athletes. You've been in a situation where you don't want to tell like the elite basketball player who's going to be in the NBA, like, you should try harder because maybe he could get upset at you. And the coach is like, no, we don't want to upset him. You're really good. There's a nuance of how to get under people's skin in the best way possible. That's a huge part of coaching because especially for power development and strength development, the maximum intent to move is a big differentiator. And if they're just going through the motions, after they've built some good muscularity, going through the motions probably just fatigues them and nothing else. But going through the motions explosively and with good technique makes them much better. And so a big part of strength and conditioning, yes, it's quite simple, but when you're actually applying it, it gets maybe not complicated, but gets to be some work because strength and conditioning coaching does not occur when you have posted up in the back, crossing, sitting on a wall, crossing your legs, just kind of watching the athletes a little bit, bullshitting with people, scrolling in your phone. I've seen lots of strength and conditioning coaches do that. I mean, tons of strength and conditioning coaches are amazing, but lots are just kind of like, when I was strength and conditioning coaching, I just walked the entire time. I crouched down, I watched people's technique, and I got into their fucking faces so they make something of it. Now, if you're doing a great job and you're getting after it, I'm going to praise the living fuck out of you. But if you are being lazy and I know you're not sending it, I'm going to have a talk with you. It's not going to be like a fucking pedantic line. You should be trying harder. I'm going to meet you where you are. I'll be like, dude, what's up? You good? And they're like, yeah, I'm good. We're like, all right. This is it today, huh? You start fucking with him a little bit. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, come on, man. I seen you jump. I seen you in a few games. They dragged me out to a basketball game. I've seen you dunk, motherfucker. Can't you jump higher with that barbell? Like, come on, coach. Like, all right. Come on, what? What you in here to do? You trying to get good? Hey, hold up. Oh, pause. Everyone, stop lifting. Raise your hands. Who wants to lose next week's game? No one's gonna raise their hand for that shit. Oh, so we're trying to get better, huh? Everyone's like, yeah, hell yeah, we are. But so we trying to move fast. We're trying to become killers, huh? Like, yeah, hell yeah, we are. Like, what you got, Johnson? Johnson's like, oh, God damn it. Never slouching again with this guy. And then he's fucking going. So that part is really, really important.
So where would you fall with the Olympic lifts?
The Olympic lifts are excellent for teaching folks to produce lots of power, especially in a way that replicates jumping and vertical force production. And so they're incredibly valuable tools under one condition, that you are a very good weightlifter yourself and you know how to coach them and you know how to teach them. If you don't know how to coach the Olympic lifts, then do not teach people bastardized versions of the Olympic lifts, because it turns out a clean isn't just like a deadlift combined with an upright row. The second pull, where you scoop your hips under the bar, is like 80% of why a clean is good. And if you don't know how to teach the scoop, I don't. I've never been a weightlifter. You won't see me teaching that shit. I'll have someone with me that's qualified, like my friend Christian Carter, my friend Ashley Kavanaugh, all PhD level strength and conditioning coaches. They know, they've competed in weightlifting before. They know how to coach it. They'll coach it. And I can see who's trying and who's not trying, so I'll still get under people's skin.
Yeah.
But on technical elements, if you have someone who's a good weightlifting coach, you want them on your team because they're value added for sure. If you don't have anyone on your team that knows how to do weightlifting properly, then you can get 80 or 90% of the effects, which in the aggregate's like 97% of the total strength and conditioning effect, just doing compound movements like presses and squats and pulls and all the other stuff. No problem. But Olympic lifting is really, really awesome. You have to know what you're doing. And I just finally get to call this out on a podcast. There are lots of people who poo-poo weightlifting, as it's called formally, Olympic lifting, in strength and conditioning, and 99% of it is because they don't know how to do the fucking lifts. And that, like, just because you don't know how to do something, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Just be like, hey, look, like, they're great. We don't do them here in our practice. We go after the basics. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But if you can recruit a really good assistant strength coach who knows how to do the weightlifting movements, you put some mid-thigh pulls into the guys' programs, yeah, fuck yeah, they'll get better. They fucking work. Can you do really, really good things that are similar with loaded jumps? Yes, you can. But the weightlifting movements are awesome. What you don't want is two things. One, coaching the weightlifting movements in your program when you have no idea, you've never done them yourself. It happens all the fucking time. You've seen high school weightlifting or high school football programs before. And the other thing is, you do not want to do weightlifting movements with anything other than maximum intent to move as soon as the folks have pretty decent technique. Because weightlifting movements are exclusively for power production. And power production is only trainable if you try really, really hard. Because weightlifting, you ever seen guys like half-ass a fucking snatch or some shit? And you're like, why? Why? Are we training delts today? So those are the conditions. But if those are met and you have a qualified weightlifting coach, fuck yeah, man. Amazing. If you don't, you're still going to do really well in your program. Just don't pretend it's something weightlifting is totally irrelevant or doesn't work. Like, shut up. It's just because you don't know how to fucking do the weightlifting movements. It's okay. No worries.
Now, when you're physically laying out the set and rep schemes over a year, how do you go about laying that out when you're dealing with a sport like hockey or something that's very long?
Yeah. I'm used to dealing with very long things. Am I right?
Yeah.
Hey. So you basically have to look at the overall competition plan. Let's say it's not up to you. So you're asking from the perspective of a strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah.
So first of all, it depends on what kind of relationship you have with a sport coach. I would say it behooves you immensely to have as good of a relationship with a sport coach as possible. The ideal situation is that you are part of a team. The most dangerous thing in sport performance is if you have we used to call in PhD program, Meg Stone and Doc Stone used to call this a consortium. It is an allied group of folks that do things for athletes. That includes the sport coaches, plural, because there are many, So a head coach, assistant coach, position coaches, etc. You have strength and conditioning folks. You have the athletic trainers, rehab folks. You have the medical folks, the nutritional folks, sports psychology folks. And if you're a really wealthy sports team, you have lots of other people on all that kind of stuff. Those are kind of the core.
Are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? Things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a Table Talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over-the-counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being.
In addition to that, has sports scientists that help you manage all these variables and track them. And they meet multiple times a year and stay in constant contact, and they architect the entire annual plan together. You're looking at like China, Bulgaria, that kind of shit, Soviet Union, East Germany, people doing what was a professional attempt at making their athletes as good as possible. There's a lot of strength and conditioning stuff, and it's real, and I respect it, where strength and conditioning coaches, like, they don't like the fucking sport coach, and the sport coach does not like them, and they fucking just tolerate each other. Sometimes that's all you're going to get. That is not the ideal. That is not something you shoot for. So you want an allied team where everyone's on the same page. And then you negotiate what is the best way to construct an annual plan. Head coach gets the first say, the third say, and the final say, because it's their fucking ass on the line if people win or lose. But a good head coach will look to the other people on their team and be like, are we good? So Coach Lindsay Devine, amazing Canadian junior team national coach, she was a coach that myself and my friend Ashley worked with at East Tennessee State in volleyball. She was the volleyball head coach. She ran a very, very tight ship. And we earned her trust after some amount of time as the strength and conditioning coaches / sports scientists. And she would eventually kind of lay out her idea of what to do. And she'd be like, what do you guys think? And we'd be like, this is good. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What do you think? She's like, okay, let's scrap that. What do you guys want to do? It was collaborative because she understood that we knew shit. We understood that we wanted to win. And so did she. There is no incentive misalignment between a strength and conditioning coach and a head football coach, for example, head volleyball coach. Everyone's on the same, literally on the same team. And so if you have that, amazing. To whatever extent you do or don't have that, you have a kind of an annual plan laid out of, at the very least, like, when are all of your competition, when are all of your training phases for the sport training, and when are your very important competitions, and when are your times off or times of lower and easier stuff. And so you generally want to split that year into relatively 3 phases. There are many more ways to split it that are more fine-grained, but 3 basic ones. One phase is what you would call kind of a preparatory phase. And that means there could be no competitions, or there could be competitions, but they're not super important, like preseason game type of bullshit. And that's your time to really focus a little bit more on strength and conditioning, to really raise the athlete's physical qualities. And they just don't have to be as low fatigued to play their sport at their best. And or the coach is like, look, like, we don't really get our training going until later, so you can have the girls or the guys for like 3 or 4 more hours every week, which is dope. That's when you're going to be doing a lot of your basic hypertrophy work, basic strength work, getting the team better. Another phase is the competition phase. And that's where, like, it's important that they win regularly. And so you're going to take your strength and conditioning, and you might be able to make some improvements. And some of the athletes don't play much or at all, and they're full send still in the first prep phase. It's just another prep phase for them, which is awesome because they really come up. But for your star players, your starters, etc., it's going to be functionally maintenance work. It's called like power maintenance or whatever. Like you train some basic strength, some power, just enough of a volume to get them a little bit better, maybe keep them the same, but the total amount of fatigue is very low. We're talking potentially, even with football players, about 2 45-minute gym sessions per week at this point. Push, pull, legs, fuck off. See you next time. 50% of that load, faster, same intent to move, push, pull, legs, fuck off. That's Monday, that's Thursday. Because they get games all the goddamn time. And Saturday or Sunday, depending on whatever, is a really big game. So you don't want them fucked up for it. So that's phase 2. Phase 3 is maybe shorter phases, but those are the phases where everyone should be laying off the players because they're recovery phases. Oftentimes you have an active rest phase during that time. So like, after their last game of the season, they won everything, etc. But all the football team looks like Mr. Potato Head, like one guy's missing an eye, one guy's like no elbow anymore. That's not the time to get them jacked again. That's the time to send them the fuck off to like fucking smoke blunts and eat cheeseburgers in their car back home, like with their friends, so that they can come back and psychologically and physically be ready for another preparatory phase. So those are kind of the 3 phases that you can have. So what you want to do is when you see the annual plan, let's say the worst case scenario, the coach is like, this is our annual plan. Here are 2 middle fingers for you. Figure out what you're doing as a strength and conditioning team. You're like, look at the guys. You're like, very well, we'll take a look at this. And what you want to do is find out where in the overall picture of the year it's best to put a preparatory phase for strength and conditioning, where it's best to lay off and let the coach have full steam and do your kind of power maintenance, and where you have to back off completely and let everyone rest so that you can have another productive, not fucked up team. And in some cases, you'll have very distinct phases of like 3 months of this, 3 months of this, 1 month of that, and then you recycle. Sometimes you'll have a week and a half of one phase, a week of another phase, and half a week of recovery. And that's the best you can do. Because like baseball, hockey, motherfuckers play all the goddamn time. But then when you, and obviously if you have a good coordinated communication with the coach, it's better because you're like, look, we have 4 games over the next 3 weeks. Which one, can you give me a ranking of which games are the most important for us to do best at? I'll tell you this, if a coach says all of them, you're dealing with someone who has not thought about sport as deeply as you. Because there's no such thing. Like some games are categorically more important than others. So sometimes they do say all of them, and you're like, okay, I got you. Aliens come down to Earth, and they're going to let you for sure, no matter what, win one of these games. Like Miracle, they're just going to do it for you. And one of these games are like, the Earth will be destroyed unless you lose. Where are you putting your marbles? Of course, they're going to give you a fucking answer. They're like, okay, State, that's our rival. We got to win that game. These guys, yeah, they're basically a D3 team that just came up. We're going to crush them anyway. We use our fucking B squad on them anyway, so fine, we'll lose that game. It's embarrassing, but we can lose it. Now that you know that, and you know you need a certain amount of training to occur, you can do a bit more strength and conditioning training leading up to the not so important games, or to look at another way, games which they'll just for sure win anyway. Like, when you're scrimmaging against like a dog shit team early in the season, you're just going to plow them under. You don't even, your first starters don't even, your starters don't even start. It's like time for that one new quarterback that you gambled on to get in there and be like, all right, show us what you can do. You can train the guys largely through that. It's a good idea to talk to your coach and tell them like, the guys will be a little stiff. And he's like, I don't give a fuck. And then later when it's like sort of important game, you go to power maintenance. And then when it's the most important game, you take the volume even lower down, give them a half a week break from all the weight room so they're unreal, super fresh and violent as fuck. Because strength and power take weeks to decay. Over a few days, you know this from powerlifting, a few days of not lifting, you're the strongest you've ever been in your life. That's how you want them. So every time you look at the entire season, an entire year, entire annual plan, you want to pick the relative phases where you can push them, phases where you need to do power maintenance, and phases of everyone backs off, and you're going to pick them. Sometimes it looks like you just randomly threw shit because the season's so goddamn complicated. Sometimes you get a couple weeks or a couple months here to really do some good work and then back off. That's ideal. It doesn't always happen. And then everything in between.
Where do you see coaches make the biggest mistakes?
How long do you have, man? I mean, the biggest mistake is just not even looking at it like that. The biggest mistake is to be like, when we're in the weight room, we do weight room things. And if the coach gives me the athletes, I fuck them up. The other big mistake is to be like, the athletes are finely tuned intellect machines. I don't want to fuck anyone up. So when they're in the weight room, we just baby them and have them do quote unquote functional movements and don't do shit. And then, you know, like, they might not get big and strong, but who gives a shit, because they're always fresh and they're never hurt by us. You can't blame us if they get hurt, which is short-sighted because you're trying to upgrade them. That's why the fuck they go to the weight room. Sometimes it's a failure to know that that kind of hierarchy exists of the more and less important games, and to kind of treat everything kind of the same. And I mean, all the way down the line, like, it's even difficult for me to come up with like, what, like, how many ways have you been disappointed in your dating life, Mike? Like, Jesus Christ, like all of them, like every possible mistake is made.
There are 3 key factors that are holding your strength back, and in my opinion, the third is the most important. We have covered all these factors on the Table Talk podcast. The guests that I bring out, we're not looking for science-based, and we're not looking for bro science. What I'm looking for are the guests that can help you become stronger. When you look at each one of those camps, they all attribute the success to the people outside of their camps as being outliers. Well, in my opinion, over my 4 decades in the sport, I'm pretty well convinced we're all outliers, because everything works for everybody for some period of time. When the focus is on one of these 3 things. First is the physical attribute. That's going to be the genetics, the biology, the recovery, the nutrition, the programming. This is generally where everybody wants to go first. Thus why you see such an overemphasis on program hopping, PEDs, nutrition, certain critical, minute gray areas of all these factors. That's why it's clickbaitable, because this is where everybody wants to go first, but I don't think it's the most important. The second, the mental attributes. This is the psychology that's associated with training, the mindset, the motivation, the focus, not just to the point of how you prepare yourself before a big lift, but how you're preparing your day, how you're preparing your life. Again, if you've been following the Table Talk podcast, you're going to see that these are all reoccurring topics that keep coming up and up. But the most important one is next. To me, the most important aspect is the technical aspect. The technical aspect is how you take all these attributes and you put them together, and it's also the technical aspects of how you perform each and every one of those lifts. The reason why I say this is the most important is because it's the last place anybody wants to look if their strength isn't progressing. For instance, how many times have you heard people ask, what exercise do I need to do to make my bench bigger? What exercise do I need to do to make my quads bigger? What kind of diet should I do to be able to bulk up or to get leaner? How often do you hear somebody say, what's the best way to put all these variables together? What's the best way to perform an exercise for the outcomes that I'm looking for? This is why we've set up the crew. With the crew, we have 3 tiers. The first tier is just if you want to help support the podcast. We appreciate the support. If it wasn't for your support, we wouldn't have a Table Talk podcast. So tier 1 will give you badges, which I guess are like a popular thing. I don't know, but we appreciate the support and we could use the support. The second tier gives you ad-free podcast, an extra AMA podcast, plus all the fun badges. The third tier is our full Discord crew membership. This is where you'll have access to the community of like-minded individuals that are focusing on pushing their strength to the next level. You'll also have access to webinars, extra content, AMAs, ebooks, programs. There's so much in there, it's hard for me to list everything. And if I did, this video would go too long. Whether you want to just support the podcast or have extra content or have a deeper connection and take your training to the next level, we have a tier for you. Click the join button.
I would say the biggest is a lot of strength and conditioning coaches learn their craft from other coaches, and they never learn anything formal from sports science. So a lot of strength and conditioning coaches are just like, they just, what's like an old boys club kind of thing. And this is dying out, but it's still around. And they just kind of do what they were taught, and they never even apply a critical thinking, because like, that's just how we did it, man. And like, that's dope, because organic, real lived experience and the experience of other older people is super fucking mega wisdom you want to pay attention to. But you also want to kind of read about shit and, you know, get like Bompa and Hoff periodization book and just kind of like leaf through it a little bit, learn some modern periodization, because like, you might be like, oh, that's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing. And you got to try some of the strategies and they kind of work a little bit. And you're like, get the fuck out of here. All right. Because whatever it is that your mentor as a coach, head coach taught you, and now you're the head strength conditioning coach and they're retired, they taught you some amount of stuff. Some amount of that shit is going to be mega wisdom that's going to just take you places. Some amount of everyone's shit, including some of the shit I'm saying right now, is fucking wrong, because I'm not connected to the base reality of the universe or some shit. Some of it's going to be some shit that like is not ideal. And some other is going to be straight up backwards and fucking stupid and holding you back. So whenever you inherit the wisdom of other coaches, and it's good to do that, like as a young strength and conditioning coach, you want to do a lot of this. You want to learn and look and copy. Then you want to analyze and read and consume, talk to other coaches, look at other athletes, read, consume, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts. It's the best time ever to learn. Something we don't give the modern era enough credit for. Like, if you want to learn how to be a better coach, remember you and I started like before the fucking internet, more or less?
You had to read.
Oh yeah, read. If you could get the books. Nowadays, like, there's no way you can max out your learning in strength conditioning, because as a human being, you're not alive enough hours of your life to consume all of the content. So as you learn, make sure to modify your opinions and visions and how you execute at the margins, keeping those awesome grains of wisdom of how to do things you learned from the old timers, 1000%. But some of the bullshit they were doing is just outdated, fucking stupid bullshit, and you can just kind of experiment. Weave that out, weave in some modern sciencey bullshit instead. See if it works. If it works well, hey, you're onto something, and then over time you get better at your craft.
If I'm going to summarize what you said, it's they don't spend enough time looking at the overreaching philosophy of the annual plan.
Correct.
And spend too much time getting caught up in the nuance of all these other programs.
And nuance of other programs, and also sometimes the nuance of specific exercises, or looking for like the ultimate exercises. Like, I've had coaches ask me like, so like with your athletes, do you do like barbell squats, or do you prefer like a fucking yoke squat or something like that? And I'm like, squat pattern, motherfucker. Do you think it matters for football? Kind of 1 millimeter bar placement one way or the other. Look for power lifter, it's a big deal. Like, you use an elitefts a safety bar, and you don't practice with a fucking 65-pound regulation bar and equip meet. You're going to be like, every squat, you're just going to like bowl forward needlessly and then come up, and they're going to be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're like, oh, this is really different for sure. But for athletes, the nuances are just like, just experiment with the guys, and the reality is just like, there's so many right answers as long as you have the basics worked out. If someone's like, okay, so do you do, like with athletes, do you do a squat just below parallel, or do you do full Olympic weightlifting squats with a pause? Both are really good. There are nuanced discussions that you can have and are valid. But if you don't know the overarching principles of sport periodization, basically the shit I just talked about now, and annual plan design, and you're really majoring in the minors, which look means you're going to be good at the minors. But if you're missing the big picture, it just kind of, you won't be as good of a coach as you could be.
The only other nuance I was going to throw out at you, we'll discuss with Crystal, which would be getting into the injury aspect.
That's a whole
the periodization. So we'll stop with this. How can people find you? Like, they should already know.
Just look for the ugly face on social media. Yeah, Renaissance Periodization, RP Strength on YouTube, RP Strength on Instagram, Dr. Mike Israetel on Instagram, and just make sure you don't turn me on in front of your children, because I swear a lot and say obscene things.
Thank you for coming out, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
The ultimate thing you want is to be good at playing the fluid game that is your sport. For a lot of sports, the lifting is just a very minor component.
Yes.
Maintaining a fitness quality is exponentially easier than improving it. So instead of trying to improve everything all at the same time, which is really hard, we can put a bunch of stuff on maintenance or close, and then really improve some things.